Micron and GM just dropped billions into US manufacturing. Let's see if the fiat crowd still has something to complain about. Micron's $200 billion chip investment and GM's EV upgrades aren't just headlines. They're proof that reshoring is happening. More jobs, more output, and less reliance on fragile supply chains. This is the future we're building. Watch the full video because when production comes home, the economic narrative is about to change.
Yeah, great stuff there, Gary, and that full breakdown. Gary, thing number 4, we're moving. We hinted at it earlier. A couple companies have announced billions of dollars of new production capacity. You're saying that you expect fiat economists to ignore this when they complain about the tariffs. That's a good one. Bring it on. Give us a thumbs down. Gary, thing number 4, those two companies, Micron Technology and GM, buy in on U.S. manufacturing.
All right, which do you want first, Rob? The good one or the funny one?
Whichever you want, whatever one you want most. How about that?
All right, let's go with the good one. So, U.S.-based memory chipmaker Micron Technologies announced a planned investment of $200 billion into American manufacturing and R&D. They are expanding plans to build fabrication plants in Idaho and New York. This, I think, is amazing, Rob. They are going to be producing high-end DRAM chips. By the way, Micron makes some of the best dynamic random access memory DRAM chips in the world, and their U.S. output is going to be 40% of total DRAM production. I cannot remember the last time the U.S. was a player in high-end chips. I mean, it probably was when, Texas Instruments had a whole bunch of guys with slide rules and crew cuts right out of the Army making these things by hand. This is absolutely incredible. A lot of the expansion is AI driven, and the company's efforts to increase domestic production is going to return market leading chip production to the US. This is phenomenal news for the country. We have needed to onshore our chip production for a while. This is a huge move. 1/5 of $1 trillion and 40% of DRAM production. In a very funny move, General Motors announced a $4 billion investment into U.S. manufacturing. They're upgrading 3 U.S. vehicle plants, some of them to boost output of electric vehicles, EVs, and some ICE, so internal combustion engines, gas vehicles. And they're going to keep a Detroit factory dedicated solely to electric vehicles, but a big part of the plan is to avoid tariffs and take advantage of tax credits for domestically assembled EVs. Okay, that's a positive development. It comes just 1 week after the company complained bitterly about tariff increases potentially affecting steel prices. Okay, guys, great. So if it really, here's my question for you, and I know, Rob, on this show, you normally ask the questions, but if it's so bad, if the steel tariffs are so bad, why are they increasing domestic production?
Yeah, very interesting. Great question, Gary. And all the thumbs down people, please let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Gary, on that, I mean, how much of this move is geopolitics? Obviously, you have the world dividing into these two camps.
Well, I think that is a huge part of it, Rob. Micron specified, they basically, if you read their press release, said, look, the world's dividing into 2 parts. I'm sort of reading between the lines, but they basically said we don't want to be caught behind enemy lines. They talked about supply chains, supply lines. The fact is that the world is bifurcating, and sourcing all of our chips from China or Taiwan or Asia, it's not a good idea anymore. These things really need to be produced, if not domestically, at least what they call friendshoring, at least in more friendly hands. I like the idea of the United States becoming a leader in semiconductor manufacturing. Again, there's no reason we can't start to relearn to do this at a high level. So huge round of applause for Micron. Also, I'm going to contradict myself a little bit here. As much as I'm a free market guy, I did see the value of the CHIPS Act, and Micron did get, $6.4 billion from that. Now, that $6.4 billion is not going to build $200 billion of domestic capacity, but the things that the government did to try to incentivize more domestic production, I think was a good idea. And, really same thing with GM saying we want to do these things domestically and not necessarily be sourcing as much from Asia. I think it makes sense. I think it would be disingenuous to think that geopolitics doesn't play a role in this.
I think, Gary, why do the economists, why do they keep getting this wrong? And I know you've talked static dynamic analysis of the situation. Is that something that comes into play here? And, is that kind of the piece that is the issue of them getting it wrong? And that's a big component that matters a lot when looking at this situation.
So that's my take on this. And when you go back and you look at all these other situations where, the government has implemented tariffs, inevitably, people said, oh no, this is terrible. You're going to raise prices. The economy is going to grind to a halt. And generally it doesn't happen. And the reason for that is exactly what we're seeing here. The reason for that is tariffs incentivize domestic production. So yeah, foreign goods will become more expensive. That does happen with tariffs. But it also incentivizes our domestic manufacturers to produce more. And we were talking about this just a week ago, just as General Motors was complaining about an increase in tariffs on steel prices. We had the announcement that Nippon Steel was buying US steel and investing billions of dollars in additional production. So, these are things that happen all the time. There are also other dangers here. There was a really interesting report. People were writing over the weekend about how China is now going back to potentially denying the United States rare earth elements for magnets that are used in basically all kinds of electronics, automotives, all of our defense stuff. But the way they got there was they took US technology, which we gave them or let them steal, depending on where you are, what's going on. And once they did that, they started to sell at below market prices, at below cost. And we had US manufacturers that couldn't compete with that. They went out of business, and now we depend on the Chinese for things that we need to produce automobiles, to produce electronics, to produce our weapons for the defense system. So these are the kinds of things that should be considered. It's really easy to say free markets are great. We should only be free market. And if people want to sell us goods below cost, we should just take it and say thank you. Well, that's fine until you get to the point where they own the production and you have no domestic manufacturing capacity anymore. And then we depend on other countries, fingers crossed, that we can keep sourcing things. And then China gets to make our foreign policy. There are issues with all of that. But the key thing here is the economists just say, okay, you're going to increase prices on foreign goods. They never do the dynamic analysis saying, but now our domestic manufacturers are incentivized to produce more. More supply can lead to lower prices. And that's, I think, exactly where Micron and GM are going here. A round of applause for both of them. We're just glad to see there are going to be more U.S. citizens working in these kinds of jobs, and we'll have that domestic capacity again.
Yeah, great stuff to see those two businesses investing in that U.S. infrastructure, and we'll keep you in tune with other developments similar to that. This week's version of the 5 things, again, the tariffs didn't create a disaster issue. Please follow our page, give us a like, thumbs up, thumbs down. Let us know what you like, what you don't like in the comments. Head to our website, deepknowledgeinvesting.com. Use the Ask Gary feature. You can submit a question into the show that you might have. And we'd also love if you consider a free or a premium subscription, especially for all those people that give us thumbs down. Definitely head to the website and check it out.